Hi, this is Brian Danford, and I'm coming to you again for the outdoor safety section, and we're going to talk about outdoor safety. And just thinking, it's like what we're trying to do though is when we go outdoors, we're trying to minimize your risk outdoors. You're trying to think about all the scenarios that potentially could happen, but they may not happen. But you're going to try to minimize those things, and you need to keep those in mind when you're going along. And your body and your environment will signal to you what's going on, and you have to adapt to those circumstances. I've been out in nature my whole life. I'm in my 40s, and I have been out in nature. I've been out in so many different scenarios. I've had everything thrown out at me. I've been in floodwaters, I've been in hurricanes, I've been in fires, you name it, I've been in it. And it's all about being observant. It's all about knowing who you are and how to react. You don't flip out. In any outdoor scenario, you never flip out. What you do is you got to, like, even if someone's life is on the line, you have to step back, calm down, well, not necessarily calm down, but you have to just take a deep breath. You have to focus, and you have to go, okay, what do I need to do in order to make this right? Because there'll be scenarios where you'll be like, okay, I mean, where your adrenaline will be pumping and everything is going 90 to nothing. And the more times that you actually encounter this, the better you're able to handle it. Like, I've been in a lot of first aid situations where I didn't know what to do. Like, someone basically bulldozed through a house, and I was one of the first few that rolled up on the scene, and I had to know what I was doing. And so it's just basically, a lot of times there'll be more than one person. Thankfully in Florida, our wilderness areas are pretty close to civilization. There are parts of Florida where you can get, especially in North Florida, where you can get into trouble. And that's the difference between front country and back country. Front country is when you're like right down the road from a hospital or within 5 or 10 minutes and your cell phone and everything's working. Back country is considered when you're way off the beaten path. Or not way off, but enough to where it'll take a little while for anyone or anything to get to you. And so you have to think, so you have to minimize those risks, because if you're out in the middle of nowhere and you have something major happen, there's a chance that you may lose a limb, or potentially, I mean, just being real and honest with you, you may lose your life, which is not a good thing. But it's all about being prepared. You don't go anywhere and say, oh, well, I'm going to go hike 10 miles and you don't tell anyone. It's nuts. Or you go canoeing down the Osceola. It's like, oh, I feel like going down, canoeing down the Osceola River today. Or maybe you go and swim on a river or a section of river that you found. And it's like, oh, this would be cool to just, it doesn't take much to take out your cell phone and go, I'm at blah, blah, blah. And just tell someone where you are. It takes 2 seconds to take your phone out, text someone, and let them know where you are. And then you've minimized the risk. So if you are swimming and all of a sudden you dive in and you break your neck and can't swim, then someone will come find you. It's like, hey, I haven't heard from this person. So those are the types of things that you need to be aware of. Always make a plan. In one of my videos, I went over the things that I normally carry. So I would take a look at that video. But you have to think about each and every, like if you're going biking, you're obviously going to have helmets and spare tires and tools to change your chain. If you're hiking, you're obviously not going to take a bike or a helmet because that would be silly. So different scenarios will require different tools, if you will, or resources to have on hand. So just keep those in mind. But I mean, when out in the woods, you have to be observant. If you hear something rattling, you're not going to keep going and taking another step. What you need to do is figure out, okay, where's that rattling coming from? And if it's right there at your feet, what you do, we're going to talk about this in another section, but if you come across a snake, you're going to back up slowly. Snakes can only strike about half their body length. So if you're out of if you're 2 to 3 feet away from him, more than likely he can't strike you. Well, I mean, it'll still scare you, and it's not fun to be snake bitten. I know from personal experience. It's not fun, but it's livable. Most people that don't live from a snake bite have complicated issues, which like heart problems or asthma or something else, or they have a severe allergic reaction. So, other things that you got to keep in mind, and this is what I would call watchout situations. So I'm going to walk through a couple of watchout situations. One is if you're on a cliff, does it look like it's securely connected to everything else around it? Because if it has a crack and you basically step over the crack in order to get to the edge, that's not a good situation to be in, because that rock could potentially let loose and you would be falling. I did have a relative have that scenario happen, and it didn't turn out well. So you have to, so that's a watch-out situation where you have to be wary about what you're on. If you start hearing it moving, or if you feel it moving, I would just avoid it altogether. Try to get as close as you can. You can even take your phone and go snap over the edge if you wanted to. However, you may lose your phone if you do that and accidentally drop it. It's up to you. That's a risk that you can take. Another watch out situation is it's a great, gorgeous blue day and you're going out hiking. All of a sudden, out of nowhere, you have a big band of black clouds coming in on you. Like, what do you do? With that scenario, you're going to have to, depending on how quickly it's coming and how far away you are, you may have to hunker down. If you don't hear any thunder and lightning, and if you don't mind getting wet, you can throw on your poncho if you have it and try to get back. I've been in many situations where I didn't have a poncho and I got soaked and got back to my car and had to have a change of clothes. Well, actually, I just got the car wet and drove home. But that is the scenario. If you do start hearing thunder and lightning, what you do in that scenario is for every 5 seconds between the sound or between you seeing the flash and the sound that it makes, for every 5 seconds it's 1 mile. And that's always good to know. So if it starts out and it's like, okay, it's only 20 or 30 seconds between the lightning flash and the thunder, so I can safely keep walking, and at that point I would probably start heading back to my car if I thought I could get back there. However, if all of a sudden you hear a loud clap and it's like 1 second or 2 seconds, that's when you're basically, what you want to do is, if you're in a field, get out of the field or get low. Get in a ditch, squat, or you can sit down like I am. If you're with a group, what you do is you spread out at least probably 50 feet. And so everyone is sitting in a different spot and sitting and waiting for it to blow over. Just remember that typically in that type of situation, you have to wait 20 to 30 minutes before you know that the thunder and lightning is over. So 20 to 30 minutes after the last sound. However, you can take a calculated risk and get up and keep going if you want. Or you can find safety if you're near a cave or something else, you can find that. So that is the way to handle that situation. Another situation to have is I'm going down the trail. It's a very hot, sunny day, and I'm noticing that I'm going through the water way quicker than I was anticipating because of how hot it is, and all the water is now on my back because I'm sweating so much. It happens. I know it's, some of you may go, "Ooh, gross," but it does happen. It's just a natural body function. But in that scenario, and if I wasn't where I'm going, and I saw that I was going, I was downing water way quicker, and had no way of getting more water, I would not suck it up. You're dealing with not only dehydration, you're dealing with heat. And heat goes from heat cramps, which is, okay, I've got cramps, and if that starts happening where you're cramping up and you're not knowing why, those are called heat cramps, and they get worse. Then you have heat exhaustion, where you're red in the face and you're starting to have a lot of fatigue, you're starting to get nauseous, and things are going downhill. That's when you seek shade immediately. You try to cool off, and you don't necessarily need water. If you have extra water, I would down a little bit more, but it's mainly just to seek shade and then to try to get back. You don't keep going at that point. If I started having heat cramps or red in the face and didn't have a way of alleviating it or getting rid of it quickly, I would turn around immediately. That's a watch-out situation, and one that I don't want to mess with. Another watch-out situation that doesn't happen here, if you're in like North Carolina or Georgia, you may run across ice. You never, ever, ever step out on ice, especially if you can see through it. If you can see through it, that means it's too thin. That means you're going to step in it and immediately go through. However, there are some times when it looks a lot thicker than it is. So it's always good to test ice, but thankfully we don't have to deal with that. However, we do have to worry about hypothermia and frostbite and those types of things. It does get cold here, and if you're not able to warm up, you can. It's basically you start mumbling, your speech starts getting slurred, and you start stumbling, which basically your coordination and everything kind of goes out the window, and then your body starts losing its functioning, and you can go into unconsciousness. So that's not a good scenario to be in. But hopefully you can, if you have a way of making fire, that's when you make fire. If you have a buddy and that's all you have, you would have to share bodily warmth. You basically figure out any way you can to get out of the cold or to get warm. If you know how to start a fire, start a fire. If you know, another option is if you haven't been really exercising, is you could do jumping jacks and go 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and get rid of it that way. So, but yes, that's a scenario that hopefully it's one of those that you plan before you leave. However, you can be in a situation, and I've had it happen, where I'm on a trail and I have a lot of layers on, and I'm sweating underneath the layers, and so I'm getting cold because of my sweat going on that layer. That's when you have something that's wicking, a wicking fabric, which means it takes away the sweat away from your body. You don't have cotton at the core of your body. If you have cotton as your base layer, or your very bottom layer is cotton, it's not a wicking layer. Cotton will absorb the water, and it will keep it there, and your life will not be fun. I've been in that many situations, and it's just not a fun situation. So it's just planning ahead and having the layers that you need. Another situation is if you're going along and you have a downed tree. If it's just a single log, you can hop onto the log and look under it, Sometimes snakes, I've never actually run across this, but I've had people that have had it, is to look under it. Because sometimes snakes like to hide under it. And also another situation is if it's cut and it has an opening where a snake could be, I would look at that hole and make sure that there's not a snake in there either. So that's a definite, you just need to be aware of your surroundings. Another one is I start having a rash after touching something. If I have a rash, it's probably poison ivy is our big one. We have poison sumac as well here. And so those are two that will irritate you and will start having a rash on your arm. Depending on how allergic you are to it, I would say 80% of us are allergic to it. And some of us are severely allergic to it, and it will, you just got to watch yourself. And if you're starting to have trouble breathing and whatever, then that's when you get your Benadryl. If you have an EpiPen, that's when you put your EpiPen in your leg and use it, because it'll save your life. Benadryl is always good to have, and it's a way of alleviating that circumstance. Another situation where you're watching out for is, do I hear a lot of buzzing? Like I'm going down the trail and all of a sudden I hear a lot of bzzz, and it's multiple buzzing, not just one. That's when you look around, try to figure out where it's coming from, and go the opposite way of it. I've run across multiple wasp nests, and that's when you figure out, okay, where is it? Sometimes there's ways of going around and keep going, but you don't mess with a wasp nest. If you aggravate them or throw stones or sticks at it, and those guys start coming after you, that's not a good situation to be in, and you'll get stung multiple times and may have a severe allergic reaction. So that's not a good situation. Try to figure out a way of alleviating it very quickly. If you're going down a trail, another watch out situation, and it doesn't feel quite right, and you've taken a lot of different, there's been a lot of different intersections, and and what you're seeing is not what you expected. And what helps with that is if you're familiar with the area and you know where you're supposed to be. However, if you're in a new area, your familiarity with the place is going to be questionable. But if you're going further than what you thought that it should have been in order to get to the waterfall or get to the special place, then that's when you turn around and go back, because you're probably going down the wrong trail. And it can happen. There are game trails that look like trails. There are service road trails that are wide enough for a car that you potentially could go down. Or maybe you did it on purpose. Maybe you're like, hey, I want to go down this way because it looks like it's a better path than what I'm on. So I would, in that situation, I'd turn around, try to figure out where I went wrong, and keep going. Another one, if I start hearing gunshots, if they're far off, I'm not approaching them, and I'm in a designated recreation area, then I'll probably keep going, but I'll keep listening. If the gunshots start getting closer and closer and closer, then that's when I make a judgment call. It's like, okay, if it's a loop trail and you know that it will go away from the gunshots, then you can keep going. However, if it's a straight trail and it looks like the trail is going straight into those gunshots, that's when you turn around and go back. You don't know where they're coming from, and our guns today can go very far, like several miles. So it's not good to get hit by a stray bullet. So that's when you turn around and go back. Another one that doesn't happen quite often here, it happened to me out west, is smoke. If you're out UTV or like out riding your ATV, or maybe you're out hiking or jeeping or whatever, and all of a sudden you start seeing smoke, and then that smoke becomes bigger and bigger and bigger, that means that there's a fire, and that's when you got to figure out your exit plan. and and that's a watch out situation where you're going to have to figure out, okay, there's something going on here, and I need to figure out a way of getting out. I was in a situation like that where I was riding around for a job, and I started seeing a lot of smoke, and it looked like it was between me and where I wanted to go. I decided to get back as quickly as I could, so I beelined it for the exit, and thankfully it was not between me and the exit. I had enough room to where I could get around it. There are ways of going through flames, but I would not recommend them. Your tires are not made to be caught on flames, and it's very hot when you're around fires. It's not a situation you want to be in. And then another thing you gotta be aware of is your body. Is your body hurting or telling you that something is wrong? You need to be aware of it. You cannot put yourself in a situation where it's like, oh, I feel fine and I have this pain in my abdomen, but I'm dealing with it. It's like, no, if you have pain in your abdomen or if you're having a hard time breathing, that's when you speak up. That's when you let someone know that, hey, I'm having trouble breathing or having blah, 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 and you react accordingly. You try to get out of there, beeline back to your car as quickly as you can. And maybe you can't. Maybe it's a situation where it's like, if I keep going, I'm going to cause this thing to get worse. And you can take rest stops. I mean, you don't have to go in one giant. If you're 2 or 3 miles in, you don't have to beeline it back to your car and in no time flat. You can rest along the way and kind of watch it, and if your symptoms go down, then that's when you start, okay, well, I'm going to send so-and-so and he'll go get help, or maybe I'll look at my cell phone and see if I have cell and say, hey, I'm needing help, I'm blah, blah, blah. There are search and rescue groups that are out there. So those are the watch out scenarios, but typically around here what you're going to run into are animals. You may run into weather. Fires are not as likely. But it's mainly, there's a lot of human-caused watch out scenarios where you take the wrong trail or you're pushing it too hard. And that's when you make stupid choices. If you push it beyond what you're capable of, you get tired. And usually when you get tired, you make dumb decisions. Your brain's not functioning optimally, and your senses are definitely not working the way that they should. So just keep that in mind. But in all these watch out scenarios, yes, it could happen, but as many times as I've been out in the woods, and the more time that you're out in the woods, the better off that you're going to be. Don't be scared of going out in the woods. You're not going to have an animal coming at you. We'll talk about that in the animal section, but just be aware of your surroundings. Just go enjoy. The outdoors is a place where you can enjoy the environment, where you can hear buzzing noises like the bugs that have been buzzing me and the birds that are singing. So there are ways in which you can enjoy yourself and just get out there. Don't be afraid. Just plan accordingly. Just be ready for what's ever going to happen, and start out small. If you want to go somewhere, you can start out maybe going around your neighborhood, or just looking in the patch of forest that's right there by your house. So it's just about getting familiar with your environment, and that's all about what the land explorers are. It's a way of taking a look at the world around you and using caution and safety, but certain times you can push it if you're in the right environment. Like if you're in your neighborhood and you want to push it a little bit and go harder or longer than you have in the past, you can go for it. But if you're deep in the woods and you're pushing it, I wouldn't recommend that. Unless you're an avid outdoorsman and know how to react when something goes wrong. At that point, I still wouldn't probably push it too much. But yeah, so outdoor safety, to conclude with is just you want to enjoy the outdoors. You want to get out there and have fun, and just be aware of your surroundings. Know what to do when things hit, and it's very enjoyable. But it can also be, there are things that that can hurt you. So thank you for joining me, and I'll join you next time down the road somewhere.